What if the biggest obstacle between you and your goals isn't a lack of discipline, but your own brain? It sounds strange, but neuroscience suggests that's exactly what's happening. Not because your brain wants you to fail, but because it was never designed to make you successful. It was designed to keep you safe, and those are not always the same thing. Think about it. Every goal you've ever wanted requires uncertainty. Starting a business, posting your first video, applying for the job, moving to a new city. Every meaningful action involves stepping into the unknown, and your brain hates the unknown, not because it's broken, but because for most of human history, uncertainty was dangerous. Thousands of years ago, uncertainty could get you killed. If our ancestors heard a noise in the bushes, assuming it was nothing was a bad survival strategy. The brain learned something very important. The familiar is safe and the unknown is risky. And that ancient survival mechanism still exists inside you today. The problem is that modern success requires the exact opposite. You have to leave what's familiar. You have to take risks. You have to do things before you know they'll work. So every time you try to take action towards something meaningful, your brain creates resistance. Not because the goal is wrong, but because uncertainty feels threatening. Neuroscientists often describe the brain as a prediction machine. The idea is surprisingly simple. Your brain is constantly trying to predict what happens next, every second, without you even realizing it. It isn't just reacting to reality. It's building a model of reality and trying to stay one step ahead. When something is predictable, your brain can relax. But when something is uncertain, your brain has to work harder. It has to process more information, consider more possible outcomes, and spend more energy trying to figure out what's going to happen. In other words, uncertainty is expensive. That's why your brain naturally prefers what's familiar, even when what's familiar isn't making you happy. And this is where most people make a huge mistake. They wait until they feel confident. They wait until they're ready. They wait until they know exactly what to do, and they never start. Because confidence was never supposed to come first. Action comes first. Confidence comes second. Most people have that backwards, and it's costing them years of their lives. Think about the first time you walked into a gym. You feel like everyone is watching you. You don't know how half the machines work. You wonder if you even belong there. Every workout feels uncomfortable. Then a few months later, something changes. You walk in without thinking. You know where everything is. The exercises that once felt impossible feel normal. The gym didn't change. Your brain changed. That's neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt based on repeated experience. Every time you repeat a behavior, the neural pathways involved become a little stronger. The things that once felt uncomfortable slowly become familiar. And remember, familiar feels safe. That's why confidence isn't something you find. It's something you build through repetition, through exposure, through action. And this is one of the most important things you can understand. The confidence you admire in other people is often the result of action, not the cause of it. The entrepreneur wasn't confident before they started. The creator wasn't confident before posting. The speaker wasn't confident before stepping on stage. They became confident because they kept showing up. But if action creates confidence, why is taking action so difficult? The answer goes back to prediction. Your brain is constantly trying to determine what actions are safe and what actions might lead to pain. And here's where things get interesting. Your brain doesn't always care if a prediction is accurate. It cares if it's familiar. That's why people stay in situations they hate, jobs they hate, habits they hate, routines they hate, because familiar discomfort often feels safer than unfamiliar possibility. Think about that for a second. People stay in jobs they hate, relationships they know aren't right, habits they've been trying to break for years, not because they're incapable of change, but because the brain often prefers a predictable problem over an unpredictable opportunity. The known pain feels safer than the unknown future. And that single idea explains why so many people stay stuck. Not because they lack potential, not because they lack intelligence, because their brain keeps choosing certainty over growth. Now let's talk about one of the biggest traps of all, preparation. Preparation feels productive. Watching videos about success feels productive. But there's a hidden danger. Your brain often uses preparation as a substitute for action because planning feels safe. Action creates exposure. Planning keeps the dream alive. Action risks failure. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to spend 3 hours researching something and 5 minutes actually doing it? That's not laziness. That's your brain choosing the safer option. And the scary part is that preparation can become a form of procrastination. Not always, but often. There comes a point where more information is not helping you. It's protecting you from having to actually begin. And this is where a lot of people lose years, not because they aren't capable, but because they become addicted to preparation. They collect information instead of collecting experience. They become experts in theory and beginners in reality. And if you've ever caught yourself doing that, you're definitely not alone. Honestly, I think most of us have at some point. We convince ourselves we're making progress when we're really just staying comfortable. So how do you fix this? How do you trick your brain into taking action? You make action smaller. Most people try to make themselves stronger. The smarter approach is making the action easier. The brain hates uncertainty, but it also hates effort. And this is where dopamine enters the picture. Most people think dopamine is the chemical of pleasure, but neuroscience tells a more interesting story. Dopamine is heavily involved in motivation, learning, and anticipation. Your brain is constantly trying to decide which actions are worth the effort. If the reward feels distant, uncertain, or unclear, motivation drops. But when the next step feels small and achievable, the brain becomes much more willing to move. That's why opening a document is easier than building a business. One feels manageable, the other feels overwhelming. Same goal, completely different response from the brain. So if you reduce the effort required to start, resistance drops dramatically. This is why the 2-minute rule works so well. Instead of saying, I'm going to work out, put on your gym shoes. Instead of saying, I'm going to build a business, open the document. The goal isn't progress, not yet. The goal is movement, because movement creates momentum, and momentum changes everything. Once you're moving, continuing becomes easier. But starting is where the battle happens. Starting requires the most energy, continuing requires far less. That's why successful people focus obsessively on reducing the friction of starting. Every time you take action, no matter how small, you cast a vote for a new identity. This is something psychologists and habit researchers have talked about for years. The brain pays attention to evidence, not intentions, not wishes, not goals written in a notebook. Evidence. Every action becomes proof. Proof that you're disciplined, proof that you're capable, proof that you're becoming the type of person you want to be. And over time, your brain starts updating its internal story about who you are. That's why identity doesn't change when you think differently. It changes when you repeatedly act differently. Every workout says, I am someone who trains. Every page written says, I am someone who creates. Every difficult conversation says, I am someone who faces challenges. Identity is not built through thinking. It's built through evidence. And that's why action is so powerful. You're not just changing your results, you're changing the way you see yourself. Most people think action changes their future. That's true, but it also changes their identity, and identity changes everything. Because once you genuinely see yourself as someone who takes action, you stop needing motivation for every decision. The behavior becomes part of who you are. And this leads to one final realization. The people you admire aren't necessarily braver than you. They often aren't even more talented than you. What separates them is that they learn something most people never do. Action comes before confidence. They stopped waiting to feel ready, and because they stopped waiting, they grew. The confidence appeared. The clarity appeared. The belief appeared. But only after they moved. Maybe there's something you've been putting off. Something you've been thinking about for weeks, maybe even months. Starting a channel, going to the gym, launching a project, having a conversation you know you need to have. Whatever it is, understand this. You don't need more confidence before you begin. You don't need complete certainty, and you definitely don't need to have everything figured out. The people you admire didn't start with those things either. They started with a single action, then another, then another. And over time, those actions became evidence. Evidence that they were capable, evidence that they could handle uncertainty, evidence that they could become something more. Because every meaningful change starts the same way. Not with certainty, not with confidence, not with motivation, but with action. And if you enjoyed this video and want more content on neuroscience, psychology, and understanding the mind, I'd love to have you along for the journey. Thanks for watching.